So we are 2 miles into our ride. We stopped at Capron, Illinois, the first town you come to. When you get to your first industrial building on the right, you're going to see a sign that says Capron Manufacturing. If you turn left on that street, you're 2 blocks away from Highway 173. Across the street, that'll take you to Casey's. We went into Casey's, grabbed some sandwiches, drinks, chips, put them back in our bike, came back to the path, started heading west again. About another block or 2, we came up to this really nice Lions Park. It's got a shelter, it's got toilets. We're going to head back on out.
You guys just called me on this, from this line?
I think my phone may have called 911. Yeah, my wife and I were riding the bike path between Capron and Rockton, and I heard a woo, this weird sound, and I looked down, and there was a red flashing thing on my phone, and I just hit stop, and it must have been calling you.
It happens a lot, but as long as everything's all right, that's all we needed.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.
Yep.
doesn't look open.
Mine says 7 till 2, which means 15 more minutes. But I have to breathe.
So we stopped in a little town called Capron. I'm sorry, Poplar Grove. This is right off the path here. Place to lock the bikes, some picnic tables, trash cans, little gazebo. But right next to it is a place called Poplar Grind. I've never been here. I've heard about it. I was hoping to get some coffee here today, but looks like they're closed for the holiday. Across the street you've got Arturo's Mexican restaurant. On the corner you've got Moscato's Pizzeria. That white building there over across the way used to be an ice cream shop. I don't think that it's open anymore, but it might be. They've got some covered tables here. It's a porta pot. And here's Hanky. How you doing, Hanky? You enjoying your e-bike adventure? Vicky's out on her electric XP 3.0. I've got the Ebike hauler. It's got a 440 pound weight capacity. 2 batteries. It says it'll get 85 miles, but I've got a lot of weight on it with Hank and the trailer and all the stuff we've got in his bag. You want to get rolling, Hank, or do you want to WALK?
He wants to get rolling.
He wants to get rolling. All right, let's get rolling. Yeah, it does not look as though the ice cream stop is open. Oh, Hanky. We lost a water bottle.
What?
We lost a water bottle on the bridge.
Oh, I'll go back and get it.
Thank you. About halfway back on the right. See it? You don't like those big bumps, do you, Hank?